Admiral Catherine Cole stood at the command platform of the Resolute, watching the tactical display paint an increasingly grim picture of the war zone ahead. The Velkari Dominion had finally done what every intelligence analyst had feared for decades. They had launched a full-scale invasion of the Tarashi homeworld, and the peaceful amphibian species had no military to speak of. The Tarashi had been one of humanity's first allies in the galactic community. When Earth had stumbled onto the interstellar stage 50 years ago, confused and terrified by the scope of what lay beyond their solar system, it had been the Tarashi who extended the first hand of friendship. They taught humans the common tongue, guided them through the bewildering politics of the galactic conquered, and never once asked for anything in return. Now their world burned, and the galactic conquered had done nothing. The great coalition of species that supposedly governed this region of space had issued statements of concern, called for emergency sessions, and debated endlessly while Velkari warships reduced Tarashi cities to rubble. Catherine had spent 3 days watching those debates, her fury growing with each passing hour. When it became clear that no help would come through official channels, she had made a decision that would either end her career or cement humanity's place in galactic history. The Third Fleet had deployed without Concord authorization. Commander Daniel Price approached the command platform, his expression carefully neutral. He had served under Catherine for 7 years, and she could read the concern behind his professional demeanor. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command," he said. "Secretary Morrison is demanding to speak with you directly." "I'm sure he is." Catherine didn't turn from the display. "Tell him I'm indisposed." "Ma'am, he's threatening court-martial proceedings. The Conquered is furious. Ambassador Vance says." "Daniel." Catherine finally looked at him, and her gray eyes held a warmth that softened her sharp features. "In approximately 4 hours, we're going to enter a war zone controlled by a species that has been terrorizing this sector for 3 centuries. Either we're going to save millions of innocent lives, or we're going to die trying. In either case, I don't particularly care what Secretary Morrison thinks about proper protocol." Price allowed himself a small smile. "Understood, Admiral. I'll inform the Secretary that you're preparing for combat operations and cannot be disturbed." "Good man." As Price returned to his station, Catherine turned her attention back to the tactical display. The Third Fleet consisted of 47 vessels, ranging from the Resolute herself, a massive battlecruiser bristling with weapons, down to nimble destroyer escorts and support craft. It was the most powerful force humanity had ever assembled, but intelligence reports suggested the Velkari had brought over 200 ships to the Tarashi system. The numbers didn't concern her. What concerned her was what would happen after they won, because they would win. Catherine had no doubt about that. The Velkari Dominion was ancient and powerful, a militaristic empire that had conquered dozens of species over the millennia. They were ruthless, disciplined, and possessed technology that had taken them to the stars when humanity was still learning to farm. By every objective measure, they should have been an unstoppable force, but they had never fought humans before. Lieutenant Commander Bate Harris entered the bridge, carrying a data pad that she handed to Catherine. "Admiral, the final analysis from Tactical. Based on observed Velkari weapon signatures and shield configurations, we've identified several potential vulnerabilities." Catherine scrolled through the report, nodding slowly. "Their plasma cannons operate on a cycling frequency. There's a 0.3-second window between volleys where their targeting systems reset." "Yes, ma'am. Our railguns can exploit that window. They simply can't track our projectiles during the reset." "And their shields?" Harris pulled up another section of the report. "Energy-based like most conquered species, highly effective against plasma and laser weapons. Our kinetic rounds should pass through with minimal resistance." Catherine smiled grimly. It was the same story across the galaxy. Every species humanity had encountered relied on energy weapons, energy shields. They had developed along predictable technological lines, building on shared scientific principles that had been established millions of years before humans existed. Humanity had developed differently. When Earth first made contact with the galactic community, The alien observers had been confused by human technology. Where other species had abandoned chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons as primitive, humans had refined them to an art form. Where others relied on elegant energy manipulation, humans built brutal, efficient machines designed for one purpose: to punch holes in anything that got in their way. The Tarashi diplomats had been politely horrified when they first toured a human warship. The missiles, the railguns, the nuclear warheads, all of it seemed barbaric to a species that had transcended such crude methods of violence millions of years ago. Catherine remembered what Ambassador Kethral, the senior Tarashi diplomat, had said during that tour. "Your species frightens us, Admiral Cole, not because you are cruel or aggressive, but because you look at the universe and see obstacles to be overcome. You do not bend to the shape of nature. You bend nature to your will." She had taken it as a compliment. "Admiral," the censor officer called out, "we're approaching the transition point. The Tarashi system will be in range in 20 minutes. "All hands battle stations," Catherine announced over the ship-wide comm. "This is the Admiral. In approximately 1 hour, we will engage the Velkari Dominion in defense of our Tarashi allies. I want every crew member to understand something before we begin." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The Galactic Conquered has chosen not to act. The great powers of this region have decided that the Tarashi are not worth protecting, that standing up to aggression is too risky, too costly. They have abandoned a peaceful people to annihilation because it was convenient. Humanity will not. We do not abandon our friends. We do not stand by while innocent lives are taken. And we do not fear bullies, no matter how ancient or powerful they may be. Today, we show the galaxy what it means to be human. Call out." The bridge crew was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then, one by one, they began to applaud. It spread throughout the ship, a rumbling wave of defiance and determination that Catherine could feel in her bones. She allowed herself a moment of pride, then turned back to the tactical display. There would be time for sentiment later. Right now, she had a battle to plan. The transition to the Tarashi system was rougher than expected. The Velkari had deployed gravitic mines at the system's edge, crude but effective devices designed to damage ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. 3 of the smaller destroyers reported minor hull damage, but nothing that would impair their combat effectiveness. What awaited them on the other side made the mines seem trivial. The Tarashi homeworld hung in space like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by the black marks of orbital bombardment. Vast clouds of debris surrounded it, the remains of a once thriving orbital infrastructure. And between the Third Fleet and the planet stood the full might of the Velkari invasion force. 237 ships, the tactical computer reported. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, and countless smaller vessels arranged in a perfect defensive formation. At the center of it all sat the Velkari flagship, the Dominant Will, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the Resolute. "They've detected us," Price reported. "The enemy fleet is repositioning. They're preparing to engage." Catherine studied the enemy formation with growing satisfaction. The Velkari were good. Their positioning showed tactical sophistication and discipline, but they were arranging themselves to fight the kind of battle they understood, the kind of battle where their numerical superiority would matter. They had no idea what was coming. "Incoming transmission from the Dominant Will," the communications officer announced. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through." The main view screen flickered, and a Velkari appeared. Like all his species, he was tall and gaunt, with pale gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His eyes were solid black, and his lipless mouth revealed rows of small, needle-like teeth when he spoke. "I am Supreme Commander Thexnel of the Velkari Dominion. You have entered Sovereign Dominion space without authorization. This is an act of war against a recognized member of the Galactic Conquered. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Catherine stepped forward, making sure she was visible on the return transmission. "Supreme Commander, I am Admiral Catherine Cole of the United Earth Navy. The Tarashi homeworld is not Sovereign Dominion space. It is the home of a peaceful people who you are currently attempting to exterminate. That ends now." Al's black eyes betrayed nothing, but his voice carried a hint of amusement. You bring 47 ships against more than 200. Your species is known for its arrogance, Admiral, but this is madness. The Dominion has crushed civilizations older than your entire evolutionary line. What can humanity possibly hope to accomplish here? I suppose you're about to find out. Catherine cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Harris, begin the deployment. Aye, Admiral, deploying countermeasures. Across the Third Fleet, missile tubes opened and began discharging their contents into space. But these weren't weapons, not exactly. Thousands of small drones scattered in all directions, each one broadcasting a unique electronic signature. Within minutes, the Valkyrie sensors would be looking at what appeared to be hundreds of additional human vessels. Deploying chaff, Harris continued. Clouds of metallic particles bloomed around the human fleet, filling space with billions of tiny reflective surfaces. Valkyrie targeting systems, designed for the clean precision of energy-based warfare, would struggle to lock onto targets through the interference. Phase 2, Catherine ordered. The fleet's electronic warfare suites activated simultaneously, flooding every frequency with noise, jamming, and false signals. Valkyrie communications would be compromised, their coordination disrupted. They would have to rely on predetermined tactics rather than real-time adaptation. On the dominant will, Supreme Commander Thexnell watched his tactical display descend into chaos. Where moments ago he had seen 47 enemy vessels, he now saw hundreds, possibly thousands. His communications officers reported widespread jamming. His targeting systems were returning contradictory data. "What is this?" he demanded. "What are they doing?" His tactical officer, a veteran of 100 campaigns, looked up with an expression Thexnell had never seen before. "Supreme Commander, I do not know. Our systems cannot distinguish between real targets and false ones. If we fire, we may waste our ammunition on phantoms. If we do not fire, we leave ourselves vulnerable to their weapons. Then we close the distance," Thexnell decided. "At close range, even their tricks will not save them. All ships, advance to engagement range." The Valkyrie fleet began to move, more than 200 warships accelerating toward the human position. It was an impressive display of military might, the kind of overwhelming force that had broken countless species before. Admiral Cole watched them come. "They're taking the bait," Price observed quietly. "They don't have a choice. Their entire doctrine is built around energy weapons and shield warfare. Close the distance, concentrate fire, overwhelm the enemy. It's the only way they know how to fight. And when they get close," Catherine smiled, "then they learn why you should never get into a close-range fight with humans. All ships, prepare for missile launch. I want a full spread, everything we have, time to arrive simultaneously." The Third Fleet's missile tubes opened again, but this time what emerged was not chaff or decoys. Hundreds of cruise missiles streaked into space, their nuclear warheads armed and their guidance systems locked onto the approaching enemy fleet. The Valkyrie point defense systems opened fire, plasma cannons tracking and destroying missile after missile. They were good at this, their automated systems having been refined over millennia of warfare. They expected perhaps 20% of the missiles to get through, an acceptable exchange rate given their numerical superiority. They did not expect the missiles to detonate before reaching their targets. The human missiles weren't designed to impact enemy hulls. They were designed to detonate in proximity, releasing their payloads in directed bursts of nuclear fire. The Valkyrie shields, calibrated to absorb and redirect energy weapons, were suddenly flooded with far more power than they could handle. Across the Valkyrie fleet, shields flickered and failed. The nuclear blasts weren't strong enough to destroy ships outright, but they weren't meant to be. They were meant to strip away defenses. "Shields are down on 60% of their fleet," Harris reported, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "They're trying to compensate, but their systems can't recalibrate fast enough. Railguns, all batteries, fire at will." The Third Fleet's railguns spoke as one, accelerating tungsten projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Unlike the plasma weapons the Valkyrie used, these projectiles were pure kinetic energy, masses of metal moving so fast that no shield could deflect them. The first volley punched through Valkyrie hulls like they were made of paper. Ships that had survived centuries of warfare were suddenly riddled with holes, their atmospheres venting into space, their crews dying in confusion and terror. On the dominant Will, Supreme Commander Thexnel watched in disbelief as ship after ship reported catastrophic damage. The human weapons were passing through his shields as if they weren't there. His plasma cannons, when they managed to lock onto targets through the jamming, splashed harmlessly against human armor designed specifically to resist energy weapons. "This is impossible," he breathed. "No species fights like this." "Supreme Commander," his tactical officer reported, his voice cracking with strain, "we have lost 43 ships. 57 more report critical damage. The humans have lost none." Thexnel stared at the display, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The Valkyrie Dominion had conquered half a galaxy. They had crushed species that had existed for millions of years, and now a race that had barely achieved spaceflight was tearing through his fleet like it was nothing. "All ships, break off," he ordered. "Reform defensive positions around the dominant Will. We need to—" The ship shuddered violently as a railgun round pierced its outer hull. Alarms screamed across every deck as atmosphere began to vent from the breach. "Hull breach on decks 17 through 23, someone shouted. "Engineering reports the primary reactor is destabilizing." Thexnel gripped the arms of his command chair, watching his empire's invincibility shatter around him. For 3 centuries, the Dominion had been the terror of the galaxy. Now they were being systematically dismantled by creatures they had dismissed as primitive, aggressive animals. Another impact. Another cascade of damage reports. The dominant Will was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Supreme Commander," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Put it through." Admiral Cole appeared on the screen, her expression composed and professional. Behind her, Thexnel could see her bridge crew working efficiently, without any of the panic that filled his own command center. "Supreme Commander Thexnel," she said, "you asked what humanity hoped to accomplish here. Let me be clear. We intend to destroy every ship in your fleet that does not immediately surrender. We intend to liberate the Tarashi homeworld and ensure the survival of their species. And we intend to send a message to the entire galaxy about what happens when you threaten our friends." "You cannot," Thexnel began. "I already have. 93 of your ships are destroyed or disabled. Your flagship is crippled. Your communications are jammed, your formations are broken, and your crews are dying. This battle is over. The only question is how many more of your people have to die before you admit it." Al's black eyes fixed on the human admiral with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "Why do you fight for them? The Tarashi are nothing. A minor species with no military value, no strategic importance. Why would you risk your entire fleet for creatures you have known for barely half a century?" Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Because they're our friends, Supreme Commander. Because when we were new to the stars and had nothing to offer, they treated us with kindness and respect. And because allowing innocent people to be slaughtered while we have the power to stop it is not something we're willing to do." "That is weakness," Thexnel spat. "No, that's what makes us human. Now surrender your fleet or we will finish what we started." The Supreme Commander was silent for a long moment, watching his tactical display paint an increasingly hopeless picture. The human fleet had taken minimal damage while his forces were being slaughtered. His remaining ships were scattered and disorganized, their crews demoralized by the sudden reversal of everything they had believed about galactic warfare. "The Dominion does not surrender," he said finally, but there was no conviction in his voice, only the empty recitation of dogma. "Then the Dominion dies." Catherine terminated the transmission and turned to her crew. "Resume firing. Focus on their capital ships. I want their command structure broken." The Third Fleet continued its systematic destruction of the Valkyrie invasion force. Ship after ship fell to the relentless kinetic barrage, their sophisticated shields useless against weapons they had never been designed to counter. Commander Price watched the battle unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. "Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from several Valkyrie vessels. They're requesting ceasefire. Are they surrendering?" "They're claiming engine failures and requesting assistance." Catherine considered for a moment. The Valkyrie might be genuinely disabled, or they might be attempting to lure human ships into range of their remaining weapons. She had seen that trick before, in the war games and simulations that had prepared humanity for this day. Tell them that any ship broadcasting a distress signal will not be targeted, provided they power down all weapons and drop their shields. If we detect any hostile action, they will be destroyed immediately. Aye, Admiral. The battle continued for another 2 hours, but it was less a battle than a cleanup operation. The Valkyrie fleet had been shattered in those first devastating minutes, and now it was simply a matter of eliminating or accepting the surrender of what remained. When it was over, the Third Fleet had destroyed 147 Valkyrie warships, including the Dominant Will and 5 other capital vessels. 63 ships had surrendered, their crews now prisoners of war under human jurisdiction. The remaining 27 had fled the system, their faster-than-light drives carrying them back toward Dominion space. The Third Fleet had lost 2 destroyers and suffered moderate damage to several other vessels. Total human casualties numbered fewer than 300. Against a fleet that outnumbered them nearly 5-1, it was an almost incomprehensible victory. Admiral, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Tarashi surface. It's Ambassador Kethral. Put him through. The Tarashi ambassador appeared on the main view screen, his amphibian features showing signs of exhaustion and stress that Catherine had never seen before. His large, golden eyes were rimmed with darkness, and his normally iridescent skin had faded to a dull gray. Admiral Cole, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. I do not have words sufficient to express what my people are feeling. When the Dominion came, we thought we were doomed. The conquered refused to help. We had accepted our extinction. You're not extinct yet, Ambassador, and if we have anything to say about it, you never will be. But why? Kethral asked, the same question the Valkyrie commander had posed. We have nothing to offer you. We cannot fight alongside you, cannot contribute to your military strength. Why would you risk so much for us? Catherine smiled, a genuine warmth softening her battle-worn features. Ambassador, do you remember what you told me during your first visit to Earth? You said we frightened you because we saw obstacles instead of limitations. You said we bent nature to our will instead of accepting its constraints. I remember. Well, there's another side to that coin. We also refuse to accept that cruelty is inevitable, that the strong must always prey on the weak, that there's nothing to be done when powerful forces threaten innocent lives. When we see injustice, Ambassador, we fight it. That's not just human stubbornness, it's human hope. Kethral was silent for a moment, his golden eyes glistening. Perhaps we were wrong to fear you, Admiral. Perhaps what we saw as dangerous determination was actually something else entirely. And what's that? Love. A love so fierce that it refuses to accept the suffering of others, even when resistance seems hopeless. A love that fights for strangers as though they were family. The ambassador bowed his head in a gesture of profound respect. On behalf of all Tarashi, Admiral Cole, thank you. We will never forget what humanity has done for us this day. The transmission ended, and Catherine stood alone on her bridge, looking out at the debris field that had once been an invincible fleet. Around her, her crew celebrated quietly, the weight of their victory beginning to sink in. Commander Price approached, his expression thoughtful. The Conquered is going to have a lot to say about this, Admiral. We acted without authorization. We engaged a member state. Whatever our reasons, the diplomatic consequences could be severe. Let them talk, Catherine replied. We saved millions of lives today. If the price of that is some uncomfortable meetings with bureaucrats, I can live with it. And if the price is more than that, the Dominion won't take this lying down. They'll want revenge. Catherine turned to face her executive officer, her gray eyes steady. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Valkyrie learned today. Humanity doesn't start fights, Daniel, but we finish them. The news of the Battle of Tarash spread across the galaxy faster than light. Within days, every species in the Conquered knew what had happened, and opinions ranged from outrage to admiration to fear. The Valkyrie Dominion demanded immediate sanctions against humanity, calling the attack unprovoked aggression against a sovereign state. Their representatives in the Conquered Assembly delivered thundering speeches about human barbarism and the threat posed by such a violent, unpredictable species. But the narrative didn't stick. Too many species had suffered under Valkyrie aggression. Too many had watched in helpless frustration as the Dominion expanded its territory through conquest and intimidation. When the human representatives released footage of Tarashi cities burning, of civilian refugees being targeted by Valkyrie bombardment, the sympathy for the Dominion's position evaporated. The Nethkai delegation, whose species had lost 3 colony worlds to Valkyrie expansion, were the first to publicly support humanity's actions. For too long, this concord has allowed predators to prey upon the weak while we debated procedure and protocol, their ambassador declared. Humanity has shown us another way. They have proven that standing against evil is not only possible but necessary. Other species followed, the Kreth, the Yalani, dozens of minor powers who had lived in fear of Dominion expansion. One by one, they voiced their support for humanity, their gratitude, their hope that perhaps the galaxy's balance of power was finally beginning to shift. Admiral Cole returned to Earth as something she had never intended to become, a hero. Crowds gathered to cheer as her shuttle descended, and the faces she saw were filled with pride and joy that made her deeply uncomfortable. She hadn't done it for glory. She had done it because it was right. The hearing before the Earth Defense Council was a formality. Secretary Morrison, who had threatened court-martial just weeks before, now sat among the council members with a broad smile, eager to bask in the reflected glory of a victory he had tried to prevent. Admiral Cole, the council president began, you have placed humanity in an unprecedented position. Your actions at Tarash have reverberated throughout the galaxy. We have received communications from over 40 species expressing gratitude, admiration, and interest in alliance negotiations. And the Dominion? Catherine asked. The president's expression sobered. They have withdrawn their remaining forces from Tarashi space and have requested formal negotiations. Their ambassador used words like mutual understanding and peaceful coexistence. Our analysts believe they're genuinely rattled. They should be. Yes, well, the president glanced at his fellow council members. The point is, Admiral, your unauthorized military action has achieved more for humanity's galactic standing than 50 years of diplomacy. We're not quite sure whether to court-martial you or give you a medal. I'd prefer neither if it's all the same to you. A ripple of laughter passed through the council chamber. The president smiled. Very well. Let the record show that Admiral Catherine Cole's actions at Tarash, while technically unauthorized, have been reviewed and ratified by this council as being in the best interests of humanity and the broader galactic community. No disciplinary action will be taken. Catherine nodded, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She had known the council would ultimately support her. The victory had been too complete, the cause too just for them to do otherwise. But there had been a part of her that feared she might have sacrificed her career for her principles. As she left the chamber, Commander Price fell into step beside her. Well, that went better than expected. Politicians follow the wind, Daniel. Right now, the wind is blowing our way. And when it changes, Catherine paused, looking out a window at the city below. Earth, her home, the world she had sworn to protect. Then we'll adapt, we always do. Price followed her gaze. What do you think happens next? The Dominion isn't going to forget what we did to them. Sooner or later they'll try something. Probably, but they'll think twice now, and so will every other would-be conqueror in the galaxy. Catherine turned to face her friend, her second in command, the man who had stood beside her through the most pivotal moment in human history. We showed them something at Tarash, Daniel. Not just our weapons or our tactics, but who we are as a species. We showed them that humanity will stand for something, even when it's dangerous, even when it's costly, even when the smart play would be to look the other way. You really believe that matters? I know it does, because now there are species out there who know they're not alone, who know that if the worst happens, if some predator empire decides to wipe them out, humanity will come. We'll fight for them, we'll bleed for them, and we'll win. Price was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the same small smile he had given her on the bridge of the Resolute when she told him to ignore Secretary Morrison's threats. You know, Admiral, when I signed up for the Navy, I thought it would be about defending Earth. I never imagined we'd end up being the galaxy's protectors." "Neither did I." Catherine started walking again, heading toward the shuttle that would take her back to the Resolute, back to her fleet, back to whatever challenges awaited. But that's the thing about humanity, Daniel. We have a way of exceeding expectations. 6 months later, the Galactic Concord ratified the Tarash Accords, a new treaty that formally established humanity's role as a peacekeeping power. The agreement gave Earth significant influence in Concord affairs and created a new military alliance specifically designed to protect vulnerable species from aggression. The Velkari Dominion, chastened by their defeat and facing increasing isolation, signed a non-aggression pact with the alliance. It wasn't trust exactly, but it was a start. And in the halls of power across 100 worlds, leaders who had once dismissed humanity as aggressive primitives now spoke of them with a new tone. Respect, certainly. Caution, definitely. But also something else, something that had been rare in galactic politics for millions of years. Hope. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching the stars wheel slowly past. The Third Fleet was on patrol now, part of the new Alliance's peacekeeping force, a visible reminder that the old order had changed. Behind her, the door opened and Lieutenant Commander Harris entered. "Admiral, we've received a new communication from the Yilani government. They're requesting assistance with a border dispute. The Kreth are encroaching on their territory, and they want us to mediate." "The Kreth?" Catherine turned, surprised. "I thought they were allies." "They are, ma'am, both of them. That's why they're asking for our help instead of shooting at each other." Catherine laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that surprised her own officers. 6 months ago, the idea of humanity mediating disputes between alien species would have seemed absurd. Now it was becoming routine. "Tell them we'll be there in 3 days. And Harris." "Yes, Admiral. Make sure we bring the good coffee." Diplomatic missions always go better with good coffee. As Harris left to carry out her orders, Catherine turned back to the stars. Out there somewhere were species she had never met, worlds she had never seen, challenges she couldn't yet imagine. The galaxy was vast and ancient and filled with wonders and terrors beyond human comprehension. And humanity was just getting started. She thought about Ambassador Kethral's words, about the fierce love that refused to accept the suffering of others. About hope and determination and the stubborn refusal to believe that anything was impossible. Maybe that was what made humans different. Not their weapons or their tactics or their technology, though all of those had played a role. But something deeper, something that had carried them through centuries of hardship on a hostile planet and now carried them into the stars. The belief that things could be better. The will to make it so. And the courage to act when action was needed, regardless of the cost. The human fleet had entered the Warzone, and the enemy had fallen before the first shot. Not because humanity was stronger or more advanced, but because they had brought something to the battlefield that their opponents had never encountered. Something that could not be measured in tonnage or firepower or technological sophistication. Heart. Admiral Catherine Cole smiled and turned back to her duties. There was work to be done, friends to protect, and a galaxy to prove that sometimes, against all odds, the good guys win. Humanity was ready.